surface. These tiles are a good example of a glossy surface, and if you ever have a glossy surface, you usually want to sand it first. But this is something we haven't brushed out. This is the Kills Original, which is an oil base. And then I also let this sit on for about a week before I put the paint and primer in one. And you know the difference between dry time and cure time? Dry time is to the touch, cure is how it's going to take to set up. And what you'll notice with the original, which is an oil base, that's on that tile, and I don't have much nails, but I really can't scrape much off there. Now here's paint and primer in one only, and that scrapes off pretty easily, but when I come back over, when it's over the top coat, I can get it up, but it's much more difficult to do. So what it's doing is, that's preparing your surface or your substrate for the top coat. And again, it's not to bash paint and primer in one. If I put any other latex, even if it weren't a paint and primer in one over this, it would probably do the same thing, because this surface was not properly prepared for the top coat.
So you're saying if you're painting tile, you want to use the Kills Original?
Yes, I would use the Kills Original, yes. The Kills Original is an oil base. It's got an odor to it, but it's worse than what?
It's very terrible odor.
Yeah, there are some other products that are a little higher in odor, but it also provides the most bind that we have. It's the best primer for stains because it has the ability to bind to something, and it's the best sealer also because it is oil based.
What about the odorless?
We'll get to that. I'll get to all the products individually. I jumped ahead a little bit. So what's a sealer? A sealer are coatings that prevent the surface from absorbing paint or leaching from the substrate. It's a way to keep the top coat from soaking in unevenly. They improve the flow and leveling of a top coat. One of the terms that is in the paint industry that's used is flashing. And flashing occurs when you have a substrate that has different textures, or different, the surface has different paints that are on it, or areas that may have been patched and then not primed. And when you put your top coat over that, you will see where that will flash through. It looks different. Probably our best example of flashing, this is a bare piece of wood, and then we put I believe this is Kills Premium down, and then an oil base over the top. And what you're seeing here, the flashing is that this soaks into the wood because it was not primed, and this has a higher gloss retention because it has the primer underneath. So the flashing occurs where I have it. Here's the gloss, and then there is no gloss. So that's what flashing is, when an area hasn't been properly primed, or there is a top coat that's gone over somewhere that's got a different surface that's underneath. Or sometimes if somebody has the older style plaster, if you paint plaster before it cures, it's got a pH level in it, and it needs to dry out for about a week. If it's not cured and they go and paint over it, there's still going to be moisture that's trying to leave that surface. One of the things I forgot to say about sealers, come on in. I use the analogy of a paper bag. I'm sorry, a plastic bag. And if I put something in a plastic bag, and if it were a stain, you would still see it, right? Because it's in a Glad bag, you'd still see what I had inside the bag. But if I put a coat of paint over it, you wouldn't be able to see it. So the plastic bag is acting as a sealer. And the analogy I use with primer is, when you put a primer over a stain, you will still see that stain. The primer's job isn't to conceal that stain. The primer's job is to seal the stain. The top coat is going to come over and hide the stain. So a lot of people, when they prime or if they spot prime, they will still see the stain and they'll think the primer isn't working. So they'll come back over and put another coat of primer over it, and they'll still see the stain. And it's not the primer's job to conceal the stain. It's the top coat's job. And then finally, stain blockers. I talked about encapsulating. That was my plastic bag analogy. Obviously, the stain could still be there, and it looks like you're going to, lock it in with the top coat that you're going to prevent the stain from leaching. All right, we'll talk a little bit about how a primer is made. You have the 4 basic ingredients. You've got your liquid, your additive, your binder, and your pigments. What the binder is that's like the glue. That's what's going to hold the paint on the wall. The pigment's job is to do the hiding. Additive may be something like a mildewcide, or they have rheology modifiers which give you your gloss, so those are additives. So those are your basic ingredients in paint. Now the only thing that will change, all the paints and primers are going to have these ingredients, but a paint itself is going to probably have more pigment, because that the paint's job is to conceal any stains or imperfections that you may have in the substrate. The additives are just things, like I mentioned, that are going to help you with sheen, or an additive may even be if you added some skid-proof product to it. And then the liquid is going to either evaporate or dry from the product, and it's the liquid is really the responsibility to get it from the liquid form in the can to the wall, and then the liquid is going to be removed from the surface and dry, and that's what's going to give you your high finish. Talk a little bit about the difference between oil and water. Do you still have people that prefer to use some oil-based paints? Really, oil is a much harder finish, like I demonstrated with this. And the way that happens is the oil never really, when the oil dries, the oil doesn't leave the product. What leaves the product is the oxygen. And then when that oil dries, it hardens. And you can see, this has, well, I think it might be, the oil base also will have a little bit of a yellowish tint to it. And in the olden days, there were people that liked that yellowish color on their trim when they did their trim work. So the other thing the oil will do is it'll give you a much tighter bond. You see the one on the lower right, that's an oil-based finish. The difference with the water versus the oil base, when the water leaves, when the water dries, the water completely leaves the paint product. And it gives you a dry finish, but it's a little more of a rougher appearance. And if I were to splash any water on the water-based product, you could see where some of that water could be absorbed into the finish. And if I came and wiped that down, I might knock off some of those higher ends of the water. And if that water gets behind the substrate or gets into your drywall, it's going to start to decompose. Whereas the oil base, that's got that almost solid appearance. The other reason I like to talk about this is if you use exterior or interior products. Water-based are primarily used outside, because what happens when you have a finish that's painted outside? What happens outside that doesn't happen inside? I'm sorry?
Temperature change.
Yeah. What do we get up here that we don't get a lot down south? Lots of snow. And that could be on a horizontal or a vertical surface. But with those temperature changes, the buildings will expand and contract. So the water base enables the paint film to move back and forth slightly when the product expands and contracts. Whereas the oil base, if you were to use the oil base outside and it gets heated up and it starts to come apart, you've got a crack there, and then if any water gets behind that crack and then the sun comes on it and bakes it, you're going to start to have peeling. So that's one of the reasons really that I compare oil-based to water, and why water should be used primarily outside. There are some people that will use oil-based outside as a spot primer. I wouldn't recommend it just because it's such a more brittle finish. Any questions about oil versus water? All right, this is our number one. The first product that Kills was primarily known for was the oil base. You said it's got an odor, right? What people like about it is it is probably our best stain blocker that can be used for smoke, water. When we talk about PET, really it's PET stains or the PET odor. And this could be used also for smoke remediation. And it's not only to seal the stain, but also it will seal the odor in. And then it could be top coated with latex paint. It can also be used on floors, and it should not be used on floors as a final coat. It can be used as on floors before you put, if somebody were doing a rehab after there was a fire, it can be used for putting a floating floor in, or if they're going to carpet it before. It's to really seal the smoke, odor, and the stains in. It's got a 1 hour dry time. Because it is an oil, it's recommended to be used inside only. Heavier stains, it's probably much more productive at, and it can be top coat with an oil or a latex. Now, I think Olympic, and it was Olympic before Olympic was owned by, well, it's PPG now, but Olympic used to have this old commercial about stain over paint, Stanley, and there weren't people that think you could put stain over paint or oil over water. But with our products, both our latex and our oil, you can put either an oil or a latex over the top. They're formulated that way. Years ago, it was completely opposite, and if you had oil, you always had to put oil, latex the same way. But our products are made to work with any finish as a top coat. Again, the smoke odor, it's meant to not only encapsulate the smell, but also the stain. The water stains, when I talked about paint being common sense, if I have a heavy water stain, I'm going to want an oil-based product. Because if I put a water-based product over a water stain, if it's a bad water stain, it may still come through because it's the water in that latex that's going to continually suck that water stain through. So if you think about it, you've got a heavy water stain, you're probably going to want to use an oil-based paint. The same with a pet odor. It's meant to not only conceal the odor, but also encapsulate the stain. And then the wallpaper. Now, the Kills Original can be used on a number of things for wallpaper. If your people remove the wallpaper and they're using chemicals to get the wallpaper wet and then a paper tiger to peel it down, if they haven't washed the walls properly and there may be some glue residue up there, that glue residue is a cellulose product, which is water-based. And if you put a water-based primer over it, you just may reactivate that glue. So again, common sense, I've got some water residue on the wall. Am I going to want to put a water-based primer over it? Probably not. I'm probably going to want to use the Kills Original. The other thing, if somebody has wallpaper and they don't want to peel it and take the time and all that headache out of peeling it, they can paint right over the wallpaper with the Kills Original because most of the wallpaper is cellulose-based or water cellulose, so if you put a water-based paint over it, it could just reactivate that. And then you asked about the odorless. It's not odor-free. It has less odor than the oil base. It can be used in schools or any areas where you have people that may be sensitive to odors. It's also good for sealing grease stains like lipstick, crayon, ink, or marker. Some areas that are identified where there may be paying attention to what you're using it in would be a school, a hospital, a nursing home.
Is this used over wallpaper?
Yes, that is an oil base and it could be used over a wallpaper. Grease stain, your wood trim, and that comes in the aerosol can. You have that in your solvent. Lipstick, crayon, ink, or marker. Now here's another aerosol that we have, which is an oil base. And I'm pretty sure that Steve mentioned this yesterday. He probably has it merchandised near your ceiling tiles. Really the biggest, there's a couple of features and benefits about this. The aerosol nozzle that's designed to shoot straight up, I think, is the #1 thing. We have a competitor that has a little more product in their can for twice as much money, but it's got the 90-degree traditional aerosol spray. So when they're finished, they're going to have the paint all over their index finger. Ceiling tiles, and the best thing about it is it's tinted with a slight yellow tint. If somebody took a Kills Original can or the odorless aerosol can and painted a ceiling tile that had a stain on it, it would be bright, bright white. It would almost appear to be a new ceiling tile, whereas they've added a tint of the yellow to it so that it's going to match the older tiles that are in the ceiling. And then the #1 latex that we have is the Kills 2. This you have in the 5s, quarts, and the gallons. Really, for lighter water stains, because it's a water-based product, I mentioned with the oil base, if you had a heavy stain, you probably wouldn't want to use a water-based product on it. The same with any grease stains, I would probably not use the latex. What we're going to be demonstrating with the gray is if you're doing a color change, a couple ounces of black or a couple ounces tinted towards the color that your top coat is going to be. If you've got somebody that's going maybe from a flat to a semi-gloss or a satin finish, it's good for when you're changing the sheens, and also a sizing agent under wallpaper. And what that means is, much like I think there's a Guards product out there, you want to get a perfect substrate up before you put any wallpaper up, and what it allows you to do is get a uniform area so that when you get the wallpaper on the wall, you can move it into position. light stains, crayons, mildew-prone areas, and the Kills 2 and the Kills Original both have a mildewcide in it. And then there are some consumers that think that the Kills kills mildew. And the one thing I'll say about mildew is, if you've got a mildew problem, you need to remediate the problem first. You can't just put a coat of paint over it and the mildew is going to be gone. And it depends on how severe the problem is. If it's a leaky pipe behind the wall, the leaky pipe needs to be repaired. If it's an entire wall that needs to be redone, that's something that probably a professional remediator like ServPro, or I don't know who you have regionally that does things like that. I believe the Environmental Protection Agency code for mildew prep is 1 part water to 8 parts, or I'm sorry, 1 part bleach to 8 parts water. And that's for mild mildew. If it's more severe mildew, you want to look to a professional. Or you have products like, is it Joe Max that I believe is a mildewcide, a mildew killer? And you want to clean the wall first. The Kills 2 and the Kills Premium will prevent mildew growth. They're not going to kill any mildew that's existing on the wall. You need to take care of that problem first. Some breed VID, and then the Premium. The biggest beneficiary of the Premium is titanium dioxide is the ingredient in paint that gives you your hide. This has twice as much, and it also is waterborne. Let me get a drink here. All right.
Do you want water or anything? Coffee, donut?
I mentioned the titanium dioxide. The other product that's in it is resin, which is the glue which will provide more bond for your top coat. It's good for blocking some lightly oil-soluble stains, drastic color changes, which we're going to present to you here. If you got any low odor or mildew areas, good in the basement, kitchen, or bathroom. Tannin bleed is an outside problem, and what that is those are the knots in any unfinished wood, and that would probably be spot coated, spot primed. What I would advise about spot priming is if you have a lot of spots that you're spot priming, you may want to just do the whole wall, because if you just spot prime in a bunch of different areas and then come and top coat over it, you're going to see each of those individual areas where you touched up. You could put this on glossy cabinets, some graffiti. Here I mentioned the tannin bleed. There you've got the knot that's coming through. And then it has good adhesion, so it could be used for any paneling if you wanted to brush up a room with some dark paneling without having to remove the paneling. It's good for medium-duty stains. And then we have our final one, which isn't available here, but we had a rep that just told us he had some people come back from California that were talking about it. But people want a water-based product. You mentioned the original and the odorless that have the high odor. But for years, we're always looking for things that will perform like an oil, but they are water-based. So we have the Kills Max. Now, it's not available here yet, but it is available in California and some of the East Coast markets. And it's really, it performs like an oil, but it's water-based. They started back in 2007, and what they were looking for was people in Europe are much further ahead of us when it comes to environmentally friendly products. So we went from 2007 to 2010, started working with different resins, and they came up with a resin which is a waterborne epoxy. So it performs like an oil, but it's water-based. Really the product that this is going against is the shellac, which is the bin in your assortment. So here, because it's not oil-based, but it is water, it has the ability to cover medium to heavy water damage, rust, smoke, nicotine. Nicotine is one of the stains and odors that I didn't talk about with any of our other products. But nicotine is a stain and also an odor that needs to be encapsulated. So If you don't have the Max, I would recommend the original or the odorless for any nicotine stains. If you put a water-based paint over a nicotine-stained area, it's probably not going to adhere because it's the nicotine that won't let the water-based absorb to the substrate. Tannin, ink, pencil, felt marker, and also pet stains that the Max will work on. They're cross-linked, which means over the years, probably 15 years ago, paint used to be all vinyl or vinyl acrylic based. And when you talk about a vinyl product, think if you filled a closet full of beach balls, and you've got all these beach balls that have big areas where problems can get into. If I took the beach balls out, put soccer balls in, that's a little bit tighter. If I took the soccer balls out and put golf balls in, it's even tighter. So what they've been doing over the years when they went from vinyl to vinyl acrylic to finally now all acrylic, they've made the molecules much more smaller so that when they get on the wall, there isn't as much area for the product, for the dirt to get behind. And then when you come over and scrub them down or wash them, it enables you to rub harder without having the product be removed from the walls. The only thing they haven't perfected yet about the Kills Max is it's not UV resistant, which means it should not be used outside, because if you most of the exterior paints will have a UV inhibitor on them, which means they can be used outside so that the light won't break them down over a period of time. Really the biggest thing about the Zinsser product, if you look at their breakdown, the ethanol is 45% of what's in the can, and the isopropyl alcohol is 5%. So that's 50% solvent. And that's why when the people work with that, it's a very strong odor. A respirator needs to be used. And in the West Coast where we use this, that's what a lot of the painters like about it. It gives them the hide that the shellac has without the overcoming lingering powers of the solvents. All right, I'll take a little bit to talk about the Paint and Primers one. Anybody have any questions? I feel like I'm going a million miles an hour here. No questions? All right. How long has Paint and Primer one been on the market? You said you've been here 2 years? I think it's been at least 2 years. I know. When it came on, it's the magic American bullet that everyone's looking for. They think they can get something done twice as fast and save some money and time. Let's take a look at it. Paint and Primer 1 and Primer really have the same ingredients. You've got your binder, which is the glue, which is going to help it stick to the wall. Your pigment, which provides the hide, and really the number one thing that's used for pigment is titanium dioxide. Titanium dioxide is an interesting chemical. If you look close on some ingredients, it's actually in toothpaste. It's in coffee creamer. So it's a whitening agent. Yeah. And they mine it from the earth. And the other thing that's neat about titanium dioxide is there are different qualities that manufacturers buy. If I want to buy like the best of the best titanium dioxide, I'm going to pay more money for it, but it's going to be a better product. It's going to give me more hide. So some manufacturers will put more titanium dioxide in something, but it won't be real high quality. So then we also have your liquid, which really is made to get the wall from the liquid form in the can to the wall and then dry. So the liquid will evaporate or be removed. So the makeup of both Paint and Primer in 1 and Primer are the same. The difference is the amount of things that they use in the cans. So if it's true, can there really be Paint and Primer in 1? Yeah. It's just that they don't put as much binder or pigment into it. If you've got the primer, I'm going to want more binder in it because the job of the binder is to make that stick to the substrate. The pigment is to provide the hide, so my top coat is going to provide my hide. If I've got a wall, actually I've got a wall in my house that it's a hallway that probably hasn't been painted in 10 years. I got a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old son that like to walk down the hallways with their hands on the walls. I could go through and paint it with a Paint and Primer in 1, but when I'm going to paint it with the primer first, and then Paint and Primer in 1 over the top. And the reason is, I'll probably use a light color. If I use the Paint and Primer in 1, I'm not sure what's on those walls. I probably won't go through, and I'll give it a light scrubbing with maybe some TSP or soap and water. But I'm not going to want to go through and get all the grease stains and all the pock marks that are off the wall. So I'd use the primer first because the primer has more binder in it. And the binder is going to be what gives you the bind for the top coat to adhere to. Here's directly from a Paint and Primer 1 website. They're telling you not only to stir it, but intermix the containers. That's called boxing. You know, if somebody's got more than 2 gallons of paint they're going to use, they want them to mix together, make sure the color's consistent. A 3/8 to 1/2 inch nap roller, that's pretty industry standard, along with the spray size. 250 to 400 square feet, which is all the same from any paint manufacturer. That's your surface coverage that you're going to get. Don't thin it if you're using a roller or a brush. However, if you're using a sprayer and thinning, it's recommended to thin with one rate of water with no more than 1/2 pint of water per gallon. Now, for certain colors, they're telling that you might need more than 1 coat. I would say probably towards the deeper colors, you're going to need at least 2 coats, maybe even 3 on the Paint and Primer 1. But what about when we have some stains? Obviously, common sense with painting. Remove the loose paint, wash off any dirt or grease. The Paint and Primer 1, as a primer, it's required to undercoat the surface to lock in the stains with the first coat of primer. And then you're going to need a second coat anyway. So, yes, Steve?
Tell them where that information's from. It's right off a paint can, correct?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's Bear or if it's a supplier that's here.
It's not Bear, but it's. I just think it's important that we know where that information is coming from. That it's coming right off the can.
It is. I'm not sure whose specific can this came from. If you'd like me to, I can find out and get back to them. But it's from a manufacturer. What you will find that's uniform with all paint and primers in one is their dry time, and that's what we're going to get to here. What we're going to demonstrate here is the color change. With the drastic color change, they're going to recommend that you apply a primer coat and then a top coat. So really the same with all these 5 bullet points is they're always recommending that you're going to use either a paint and primer in 1 or a primer as a base coat and then top coat it. So we're always dealing with at least 2 or 3 coats of paint. So there's a time issue. Area preparation, really what's in the red is called out for severe stains, watermarks, and other challenging conditions. Use the appropriate brand primer. So if somebody's painting masonry or plaster, call out the 30 days that you're going to need for the paint or the surface to cure. This is really the most important slide out of the whole presentation. If I had a room that required 2 gallons of paint, I'm going to roughly spend about $60. If I used a coat of primer first and then paint and primer 1 over the top, I'd spend $47. So I'm serving $13, and that's for a 300 square foot room. What we don't call out here is the time factor. Paint and primer in 1 says dries to the touch in 2 hours, and depending on the humidity, you can recoat it in 4. Whereas the Kills product dries to the touch in a half hour, and it can be recoated in an hour. So there's a longer dry time depending on the color temperature and the humidity for the paint and primer in 1. When are you going to prime?